In this episode of The Bear Roars, Dan sits down with Isaiah Chavous and James Paul, co-founders of Noctal, an AI-powered platform transforming how creators build sound design. Isaiah's roots run deep in Colorado, from growing up in Colorado Springs to leading CU Boulder's student body during COVID. After graduation, he dove headfirst into the world of startups at Jadu, where he met his co-founder James. James got his start in Hollywood, starting on a set as a PA and rising through the ranks to a producerial role, working on major films before making the leap into tech. Now they're building tools to help creators move faster, sound better, and stay in flow. They talk to Dan about startup life, creative tech, and what it takes to build something that lasts. Let's poke the bear to kick off the conversation.
All right, well, this is going to be a little bit different than some of the other ones. For one, we're on location, sort of.
Yes, we are.
We're not in the usual spot. We're on the road, but we're actually here in Cabo.
Yes, we are.
And we're using the setting of my home out here as the podcast. So that's the first time. Yes. But more importantly, most of my guests are either in the prime of their career or they're past the prime of their career and they're reflecting back on all they accomplished. You guys are really, in a lot of ways, just getting going. So here's what I'm going to start with. Tell me what it's going to be like for each of you 20, 25 years from now.
25 years.
What do you think you will be? How do you think your heyday would have played out?
I think there's a couple prerequisites. Okay. There's the dream, which is, of course, you want to be at a place where you have some flexibility, right? Open doors means more opportunity, which means that you've done something right. But most importantly, I think maybe this is a cliche. I have said this before, but I hope to have done something grand enough to either A, be written about, or B, be forgotten about. You know, it's one or the other.
Well, how is grand enough to be forgotten about? How does that work?
Imagine inventing something like so ubiquitous. Like who invented, there's a new...
who invented bandwidth?
Is that your question? We have the inventor here with us. But I don't know. It's going to be a lot of grinding. Right now, it's almost hard to see 25 years from now. I'm seeing like 4 days from now, 4 months from now. Noctal is all consuming, but in a good way.
And we're going to talk a lot about Noctal and what the whole idea behind that is and how you guys are doing as you're getting launched. So we're going to come back to the here and the now and the short term.
Stay in the future.
But any more grand thoughts about when you reflect back? Let's see, in 2050?
What you got?
So I think what I've got, which I didn't expect to come up, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut more than anything. And my dad was like, oh, be an astronaut, you gotta be really good at math. And I didn't like math at the time. And all the .com millionaires were buying tickets to space at the time. I was like, oh, okay. So I just have to go start a company and make some money and I can go to space. I guess I'll do business.
Okay.
So you asking where I want to be in 25 years, I was like, oh, ideally I'd like to finally be able to afford buying that ticket to space. I think I want to do more than just that, but that was like the knee-jerk reaction when you asked. It was like 25 years? I want to go on a rocket.
Well, it'll probably be somewhat expensive in 25 years, but a lot less expensive than what people are paying right now. So that's actually a dream that is likely to come true, James.
It's possible. It's possible.
And do you think you'll find any life forms?
Any
non-human
intelligence?
Non-human intelligence?
I think...
So I bring that up because we had a quick conversation beforehand and we share in the interests of UAPs and non-intelligent life forms. And so tell me about your interest in that area and where that came from.
I think it comes back to wanting to go to space as a kid, always looking to the stars, wanting to understand our place in it and feeling like we can't be the only ones. And then with everything that's happening in the news and whispers here and there, I don't know what's happening, but something's happening and it feels curious to learn more.
Yeah, It certainly feels like a lot has been coming out in recent months and a lot more is going to come out in the very near future. So tell us, usually when we invest in a company, it's a Colorado-based company. We've made exceptions, but we've wound down the exceptions to the rule. Yet our new investment is in Noctal, you guys. So maybe Isaiah, tell us about your Boulder connection and your journey through Colorado.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about how you left Colorado to end up in kind of the center of the universe for what you're trying to do.
Yeah. Well, first of all, we bleed black and gold. Go Buffs, always.
Go Buffs.
Yeah, I grew up in Colorado Springs.
Prime at some point is going to...
Shout out Coach Prime. I'm in the documentary, I think, in a couple episodes.
Oh, are you?
That's what I heard. Somebody, last episode or something. Small clip, but hey. Shout out Prime. But yeah, I mean, I love Boulder. I love Colorado. I grew up in Colorado Springs. Went to high school there, and then, really had my eyes set on USC once upon a time. As kind of full circle. Went out there for a visit thinking, we're going to be by the beach. It'll be super cool. They had a school at USC that I was pretty interested in. It was the Jimmy Iovine and Dr. Dre school. And ultimately, I didn't get in. It was the science score was a little too high for me. And so, at the beginning.
What is that? What is that?
It was
school?
the school of, I believe it's called the School of Innovation within USC.
Within USC.
Remember, they had all these 3D printers, and it seemed grand, but I hadn't been to Boulder yet. And I went on my tour to Boulder afterward and fell in love. I remember thinking it looked like Hogwarts. And, I was on this kind of trajectory where being home didn't feel big enough. And that was a huge oversight because I showed up on the Boulder campus and it changed my life. Colorado has changed my life. My family is there. I've grown up there. And Boulder was an incubation area for me where not only socially, but academically, creatively, I got to really flex some muscles that I don't think I otherwise would have been able to do anywhere else. And so in 2021, I graduated in 2021, and the year of COVID, so 2020 through that last year of 2021, I was a student body president there, which for a lot of the listeners might sound like a book club or something that's like, oh, you got good grades, good for you. It's a little different than that. It's the most autonomous student union in the country. And so in hindsight, that's pretty
what
crazy.
makes it autonomous? What do you mean by most autonomous?
Yeah, that's a good question. So it's a separate entity from the school or administration. It's its own organization. It runs with the oversight of the students in charge. So if you get elected to lead the different organizations, you in fact really do fiscally lead that and practically lead that with a staff, and you own buildings on campus. And I think now the budget's about $26 million. And I think that's what I was running at the time, which in hindsight, to let a 19 or 20-year-old do something like that seems insane. But it worked out really well.
What were some of the more difficult aspects of that position that you had to deal with and learn from?
That's a good one. There's one that stands out, which is, well, there's a few that are really prominent. It was COVID. So you had a huge dependency on people who actually were in need. I mean, we had to do huge food drives. We had to really support the community, the broader community, not just students, So that was an interesting time. On top of that, I was the second Black president ever behind Joe Neguse.
I didn't realize Joe Neguse was president of the university at one point.
Yeah. So that was interesting. That actually served, I wouldn't say it's always challenging, but it certainly was challenging. And since you have a lot of political views, which is exactly how it should be, and there are strong political views for what I was up to. I did a lot of big things, or what I would say are big things, and others might not, but co-founded the Center for African American Studies on campus, which is in Mackey Auditorium, did some stuff with the prison system. I got a Colorado Senate Award for that at the end. So my roots are deep in Colorado. And then graduated and moved to Los Angeles to join a startup, which was a crazy decision at the time, actually. It was like, I remember thinking, this is the riskiest play that I will have done up to that point in my life. And I had my eyes set on law school. I was like, I'm going to go to the West or the East Coast and go to Georgetown or go to somewhere else. And I decided to roll the dice on this tiny startup in LA. Joined and it scaled, raised a bunch of money, got all the experience, got to do some cool stuff.
What was your role as you joined them?
So I started as the EA to the CEO and the COO. I moved in with the CEO. I'm sure he'll be listening to this, so shout out.
Well, if it's a shout out, you got to give his name.
Ussid. Shout out. Jake,
shout out
Sally. Shout out you guys. They changed my life in many ways.
I met Jake at one point, event that they host on CU's campus that he came and spoke.
Conference for World Affairs.
Conference at World Affairs, exactly. So
he's a great
And then shout out Jake. Jake's who connected us with Cody in your office as well. And that's how we all came to be.
Oh, all right. Good deal. All right.
Yeah, they're good. They're good folks. But yeah, started off assisting both of them and then moved into leading BD and partnerships there as we started to scale. And I was deeply involved in the fundraising process from seed to Series A, I guess technically pre-seed to Series A. And I learned a ton. It was to be a sponge. And then at some point came to James. So it was about 3 years after I started at Jotty.
Well, let's pause there.
Okay,
Let's catch James up. So
pitching.
James, what's your story leading up to your guys' meeting?
Which was raw.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to get to do a lot of different things. So I started out in physical production in film and TV. And what that means is physical production is the actual shooting of those projects, as opposed to post-production, which we're going to talk more about with Noctal. And was a director's assistant, producer's assistant, set PA, associate producer on a couple of wide release films, and got to learn a lot about the creative side of the business side of the business, working for a line producer on a $200 million movie. Got to see how that gets spent. And what
movie was that?
That was the 2016 Ghostbusters. So it's known colloquially as the female Ghostbusters. So that was a lot of fun.
Did that do well? I don't even know if that did well.
It did not do well.
Yeah, as someone who grew up on the original Ghostbusters, I could not get myself to watch that.
I can tell you all sorts of stories afterwards. So a lot of the original cast came out. Was a lot of fun to shoot. I'll put it that way. But is there
any of those stories you could tell us here on mic or
spill it?
Let's see. Please. What's a good
interesting but safe?
Yeah. So I was worried I almost killed Dan Aykroyd.
So was John Belushi for a long time. Hopefully not through drugs like John would do with them.
Stairs. It was stairs. We were filming at City Hall in downtown Boston. We were doubling Boston for New York due to the tax credits. You know, a lot of New Yorkers felt some kind of way about that. I would too if I was from New York. But it was a business decision. And Dan was supposed to get picked up by his Teamster driver. And he didn't see the driver in front of his hotel. He was there. He just didn't see him. So he took a cab to set. And he's not happy about this, which I would be too if I was him. Like, it's amateur hour. They're not even sending me a car. And the cab dropped him off at the base of the steps at Boston City Hall. And anyone that's been to Boston will know there's a lot of steps. And I get a phone call from Ivan Reitman's office in LA, an assistant there, who says, hi, James, I have a very upset Dan Aykroyd on the phone for you. Here you go. And patches me through. I've never spoken to Dan before. You know, I've helped work on his deal and things like that. But, you know, and I'm like, oh, hi, Mr. Aykroyd, where are you? And, you know, he was very worked up. And then I was running around City Hall trying to find him and waving my arm. And he got to the top of the stairs and was understandably out of breath. And I was like, I think Dan Aykroyd's about to have a heart attack. And did I just kill Dan Aykroyd? And thankfully I did not. Got to his trailer.
Thank you for that, because love Dan Aykroyd.
We appreciate you for that.
He filmed his scene, and later on he came up to me and thanked me. He's like, hey, sorry about the confusion earlier. It was super, super nice. So all's well that ends well, but that was a fun one.
Yep. Okay, so you did Ghostbusters 3 or whatever it was.
Yep. And so that was the second feature I was an associate producer on. So at that point, I joined the producers.
What was the first one? Did we skip?
We did. It was a Nicholas Sparks movie. So the guy that did The Notebook. This film was called The Longest Ride. We shot it in North Carolina. It was gorgeous. And it was Scott Eastwood, Alan Alda, Jack Houston, Una Chaplin, Charlie Chaplin's granddaughter. Another really fun picture. But I did those two, and in between,
at a young age, though, too, right? I mean, how old would you have been back then? You're still young,
23 or 24.
Yep.
And
how was it that you got to be in those positions at such a young age?
Persistence and luck, and I think that those two go hand in hand. I went out to LA one summer while I was still in college, and told my parents I was going to get an internship.
And they laughed.
I was going to be there for like 8 weeks. Week 3, I didn't have an internship. And they're like, what are you doing out there? But I finally did get an internship cold calling places, and ended up at a company called State Street Pictures and interned there. And when I graduated, the director there, George Tillman, his assistant was moving on. And so I became his assistant, and did season 1 of Power on Stars with him, did The Longest Ride with him, a couple other things, and then moved on to assisting some other folks in climbing. So all of that was great. And then the hard pivot to tech was a friend of mine got a virtual reality headset. And I was looking at how competitive film had become because everyone had a camera. Everybody had editing software. And I looked at VR and said, this is a greenfield. If I can make something in this space and stand out, maybe I can climb faster in traditional film and TV. And so I ended up going to work at a couple of different VR and AR startups, including Within, which later got acquired by Meta. And then most recently was at Jadu AR, augmented reality, with Isaiah, where I was director of community when he was heading up BDM partnerships after he climbed out of that assistant role.
And head of community means what in that context?
Yeah, so great question. So they have a mobile augmented reality game. Also, we were riding the NFT wave. So at the time, I was managing a Discord community of about 30,000 people. They poured several $1 million into our NFTs, and then those had a whole secondary market. And now there is a mobile shooting game, is the current iteration of Jadu. But I left about a year ago to found Noctal with Isaiah.
And how's Jadu do now? Are they considered to be headquartered in LA or headquartered in Colorado or some combination thereof?
They're in LA. Yeah, they're headquartered in LA. I think, I don't know the percentage of the team breakdown now, but a good chunk of us were in LA once upon a time, and a lot of them are still there. They're doing okay, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good deal. So you guys start to get to know each other while you're both still there.
Yep.
Maybe Isaiah, take us through what happened next.
Yeah. I think what's important to note, one clarification I want to make around the term NFT is a scary term nowadays,
yes.
Right? And I want to make sure that we clarify what that meant then, because it wasn't, I think, what some people might assume that it was.
We weren't just doing JPEGs. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, they weren't flat images. It was a 3D game world where every asset within the game, which is a real game, and you can go play it today, was going to be tied to the blockchain. So, Apple came in with some mandates, and that is no longer the case. But at the time, we were very excited by that. So I just want to clarify that.
Well, talk a little bit more about that, because that what you just said there is going to go right past most of the people listening. So explain why that's important, kind of why you called that out, what the evolution of NFTs were back then, what they are today.
That's a good. So I think I'll speak to the Jadu context, and James would be a better person to talk about the evolution from then to now. I think more nuanced, but at that point,
this is what, 3 years ago?
About 4 years ago.
4 years ago.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. The bull run was about to happen, or happening slowly but surely. And there was a big push, especially from people in AR and VR, to gamify some of these things, really bring AR and VR to mainstream. And that push is still active today.
Mm-hmm.
The folks who were on the blockchain side were focused on more tradability, right? They were, in my opinion, microeconomies that were hyperinflationary. Just by nature, you have a group of people or an IP category that would allow people to quickly invest and quickly withdraw, and it created hyperinflation. We wanted to create a more long-term, persistent game world where people could truly immerse themselves in the experience of the game. And when I unlock a new weapon or I unlock a new location, I have ownership in that property or in that item. And that was kind of the very basic foundation of what we were trying to build. Nowadays, I think that we've seen a lot of rug pulls or scams, pyramid schemes that are related to blockchain. And so a lot of that has been kind of condemned, which I think in many ways was rightfully so. And other ways, I think it's one of the most innovative technologies on earth. And I hope that it continues to go where it is. But
I think it's very similar to the .com boom. There's an interesting technology. People are going, hey, this is going to shake things up. But amidst the, fervor to be a part of the next big thing, 90% of them are going to end up being nothing. And then, it's trying to find that racehorse that you're picking, that's going to survive, that's going to be the next Google, things like that. I'm actually really excited just to see where blockchain goes from here. I mean, I think we're seeing it integrated in more and more interesting ways. And it's going to be very interesting, in my opinion, seeing how AI agents coupled with blockchain may be able to accomplish things that we can't even imagine yet.
Yeah. So speaking of racehorses that you pick that will become the next Google, tell us about Noctal.
Here we go. I like that. Great introduction, Dan. That's what I'm talking about. Yeah. Okay, one-liner. Noctal makes sound design easy. And our mission is to be a creative assistant for people who are embedded in content creation. So the simplistic form of how the platform will work when it's available very soon is, as an editor or as an independent creator, I can upload a video. That video gets analyzed by our internal engine. And this engine understands all of the actions, sequences, and events that take place over video. And so we're focused on sound effects. So that's everything, at least how we categorize it, outside of music and spoken word for now.
So why doesn't the sound already come with the video? So when you take the video, doesn't the sound just already exist?
So I'm going to answer your question with a question.
Okay.
So do you know what the difference is between like a student film and a professional film? When you first watch it, what's the subconscious thing you're going to clock first?
Oh, geez. Gosh, I'm stumped. I don't even know how
It's okay. I'm going to give you the answer.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm a generous man.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's sound design. So on a subconscious level, your brain goes, oh, this is a quality production when there is a complex and rich sound bed, as opposed to, a student film, besides looking amateur, it's going to sound amateur. And that's no disrespect to the students out there. I was a student filmmaker too. But that level of complexity gets added in post. Yes, you do use sounds that were captured on location, but I mean, I think we've probably all seen a behind the scenes footage at some point of somebody, walking with shoes on rocks or something to create different sound effects, for films.
Gotcha. So the idea behind this is there's a lot of film being created right now, more so than any time in history. I think it's safe to say, and the pace in which film is being created, video is being created, is accelerating as well.
Not just film, any form of media.
Any form of media.
We're going to have more content year over year.
So you say every form of media.
Short form content. I mean, think about TikTok as just a platform. It has taken the world by storm. What people don't realize is, yes, a lot of the content that we intake quickly might be small dancing videos or things that are not narratively driven. But a lot of the best performing content, whether that's on TikTok or on YouTube, long form, Instagram, Reels, this is narrative based content, short form or long form, comedic, skit. And the underlying components to that do include sound. And, alongside the film industry as well, yes, we have super long form, which is more in the enterprise side of things. When you go to the movie theaters and you're seeing commercials online even, these involve a post-production process no matter what category you're actually consuming that content. Sound is a part of each and every one of those categories. And
I think it's important to denote, especially for anyone that doesn't actively make media, just how much time and effort goes into this. If you want to speak to maybe like Olav's example, and I could speak to like a film side.
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the creator and it depends on the kind of content, but the amount of detail and just pure time, the time investment that it takes to create high quality content. The word content has been also just watered down. I think we are going after small business creators. These are people who are putting genuine amounts of time into their content, whether that's to make money or to grow a following that's meaningful. And, we have friends and advisors who put many hours, shout out Olav, by the way, into making some of the highest quality content on the internet. And a lot of that time is in sound, but no one wants to talk about it. It's not as sexy as music. It's not as sexy as animation, but it is one of the most important and time-consuming parts of the process. And we aim to streamline that for everybody and kind of democratize that process.
Gotcha.
And so the way that you approach doing sound design, the first step is a process known as logging. And it's what it sounds like. It's a human sitting there watching the footage, ingesting it, and logging. Okay, we're going to need a dog barking at 30 seconds, a car door slam at 40 seconds, things like that. And I
imagine when they're doing that, they're picking up the most significant sounds that are needed on the screen, because if they were trying to pick up every possible sound, it would just take a lot more time to do that.
It starts with, okay, what's the obvious stuff? If we were going to do sound design on this, okay, we would probably, start with some sort of ambient kind of desert environment, because you and I can hear additional sounds in the distance, but we can control for the viewer a atmosphere. And so you would start with kind of basic building blocks and then drill down. And when you go to like action movies and sci-fi, that's when you start to see some really cool stuff where, maybe they're banging pots and pans, but they're making it sound like some sort of futuristic flying machine of some kind.
I also think it's important to touch on like the frequency and the number of sounds is what you're getting at as well, which is, can somebody actually capture every nuance and detail that could be in a scene or in a clip? And the answer is there are a lot of highly talented people who spend their entire careers investing into a human-made creation, and that's what we go to the cinema to see. And these are go watch Interstellar, go watch the thousands of incredible movies. There are Foley artists and sound designers who have made the nuance that is hard for us to even notice present in that clip or in that film to make it great. And part of our thesis at Noctal is to plant our flag firmly on that mound, which is, as of right now, we're using only human-made sounds in our library. We want to elevate the human creation and place human-made sound. We just want to assist in that.
What do you
process.
mean by human-made sounds?
Not generative. Mm-hmm. So there are libraries where people, Foley artists, have spent time curating, hey, this sound needs to reflect a footstep on gravel in an ambient location with rain, right? And extrapolate that out to 1 million plus sounds or hundreds of thousands of sounds. Why fix something that's not broken? There's a lot of hype right now on generative media, and rightfully so. Generative AI is an incredible thing. But we are really wanting to carve out space for the creative. So,
and why is that? Why is that important? If Gen AI could create sounds, why do you want to focus on human created sounds?
First off, Gen AI audio, we don't feel is ready for prime time. If you already have millions of pre-existing high fidelity sounds, why wouldn't you use them? It doesn't make sense just to use AI because it's the buzzword. Where it does make sense to use AI is for things like event extraction. So instead of you having to sit there and watch all the footage and ingest it for hours and hours and hours, an AI can do that. And we don't feel like,
and just to break that down, when you say sitting there ingesting, it's what you talked about earlier. It's,
the logging.
It's watching the video and logging exactly when and what type of sound should come into the scene, which is a tedious process. My guess is a process most humans have no interest in doing.
Even the professionals, I'd imagine, don't love that process.
Yeah.
I mean, on a feature film, they might spend, half a year on that. There was a 30-second clip on Instagram that a creator that we're working with said he spent 6 hours on the sound design. This is just on the sound design, not the whole video, just the sound design. He spent 6 hours on that.
And when you use the word sound design, which is broader than what we were just focused on.
Yeah.
So maybe if you could define, when you use the word sound design, what's the full extent of what you mean by those two words?
Yeah. We do use sound design slightly interchangeably, but really what we're focused on, as I mentioned earlier, is everything that is not music or spoken word. That's footsteps, gunshots, door creaks, ambient sounds, transition sounds.
But the beginning and end of what you would capture in the word sound design, the beginning is ingesting a video and tagging basically what the timestamp is and what the sound is. So if that's the beginning of the process, what's the end of the process that you shorthand and say sound design?
Yeah, I'd say it's multi-layered. So you have the ingestion of what's happening, when it's happening, and honestly why it's happening, the context of the event. And then you go and you match.
So when you say why it's happening?
Yeah, I mean, think about you have two identical scenes. Okay, it's us sitting here. The cameras are on us now, and if we had a ambient bird chirping, maybe the visual elements are black and white, and there's a stoic shot of you sitting in that chair. The sound composition alone, even without music, will determine, is this a horror film? Is this a serious but uplifting moment? Or is this a somber kind of bleak moment?
Mm-hmm.
All with 4, 5, 6 sounds can completely change the audience perception of what's happening and why it's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the context. That's the emotional choice that we are giving the user as well.
And mood would be a word that comes to mind.
Yep. Mood.
Gotcha.
And then the true depth of sound design at some point, which Noctal is not going to be the replacement from A to Z for everything. That's not our goal.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal is to get what you need faster than you could otherwise do it, to leave room for creativity and artistry. So that way you can have that mood, that style, that independent line of thinking when you're editing.
How would the sound design artist express this ambiance or mood, or I'm trying to remember the other words you used to describe it. How would they express that when they're looking and trying to create?
That's a good question.
So I think
space.
Chris Nolan movies are a good example of this, where the sound design almost becomes like a music score, because there will be a rhythm, a repetition to something that, things are becoming more intense. Let's think like Inception, when the worlds are starting to break down. You're going to have a layer of complexity to the sound design that creates stress. And you can do the inverse of that for something that you're trying to have a meditative state, have a beautiful scene in, I don't know, White Lotus. I was watching over the weekend.
And the barrier to entry is different depending on who it's for. When you're talking about a Chris Nolan movie, you're talking, this is A+, this is the top of the top. You're going for the most nuanced, deep, full, and fulfilling experience from the viewer. For somebody who's more on the novice to intermediate side, they might not even have the full scope or even the skill set to encapsulate what that could be for a piece of content, say that they did on YouTube. And what they need is a bump in quality. They need a bump in execution and accuracy. And we can provide all three of those.
And a bump down in cost.
Yeah.
Way bumped down in time.
Cost and time. Time is
money.
That was money. Okay, so we're setting the beginning of the sound design. When does the role that Noctal wants to play, when does that culminate? What's the end of the sound design process?
Well, for us, we can talk about what the end of the sound design process is as a category, which first and foremost would be mixing, mastering, leveling, panning, effects, right? Getting one sound to fit what you're seeing on screen. It's not like you find a sound in a library, you place it down and you're done. A lot of the time, you add a lot of other elements to that to make sure that everything is correct. That would be the final.
For example, what would be elements you would add during?
Yeah, so you would add,
process?
let's say, a reverb. So we're sitting in an open space right now. Say I find a sound, or I have a Foley artist who makes a sound of, Cody over there walking through on the tile floor here.
Cody does not look comfortable the way he's sitting.
Gotta relax, man. Gotta let it loose. And let's say we have a sound of him walking through the tile, and it sounds like he's inside. It sounds very dead, just the exact sound. But we're really in an open space. There's a lot of reverb. There's a lot of echo. That would be an effect that I would add. I would spatialize that sound. I would add compression.
Also, to the viewer, make it feel like the space we're in is even bigger than it is. If it sounds like it's echoing in like a cavern, it's like, oh wow, the space they're in must be very large. And that's one of those things that sound can help. We're talking about Inception, but incept you on the subconscious level of telling you where the story's going. But I think the question that you were just asking, was it around like, when can you use Noctal as a creator? Is that kind of what I was understanding?
Yeah, like how you envision the full extent of what Noctal is going to bring to the process that you guys call sound design. Yeah.
Something that made us both very excited early on and was a green flag to me that, okay, we're on a problem that people want to be solved, which isn't always the case for every startup. was realizing that people can get value out of our product along the way. When you go film something, the first footage from the day is called dailies. And so they send the dailies to the studio, to the executives director, make sure, hey, did we get everything? Also have rough cuts and rough assemblies. If you're just trying to do something fast and dirty to get an idea of, hey, what could this look like? Come upload your video to our platform. It'll give some suggestions, and you can do that very quickly instead of spending hours and hours and hours on getting it perfect. And so that's like the low-hanging fruit. But then you can move up from there to fine tune as well. And so, Noctal will be for anybody that's going to be creating any kind of media and wants to increase and elevate their sound from the consumer to the professional.
Mm-hmm. Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, you look at like things like Adobe, right? The giants in the room, they make fantastic products. But they're extremely complex, and the learning curve for a lot of people is very steep. There's a lot of bloat. Our aim, and to fully answer your question, we're actually going to have to see how people react to our value proposition. Mm-hmm. That's just the truth of the matter. If I could tell you 10 years from now exactly how it would be, I'd be lying. Where I think it will go is going to be a copilot of sorts for people who are deeply entrenched in making and creating media. And we're using AI as a leverage point to make that faster, more efficient, cheaper, and more accurate. Things like Adobe, there's a lot of amazing features and tools, but they are not curated for the novice or intermediate person. They're curated for the more advanced consumer, somebody who's been with Adobe for years. And I'm picking on Adobe right now just because they're the largest player in the room. But
and you'd like to have their valuation at some point.
Yeah,
that'd be fantastic.
They've played the game well, and Figma is a great example of somebody who did something that Photoshop did once upon a time, streamlined it. It was built by creators for creatives. And we saw how that went. Adobe said, hey, actually, we'd love to have that energy in our company as well. I don't think it ended up.
Yeah, the deal didn't go through.
SEC blocked it or something like that. But hey, big fans of Figma over here too.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you mentioned this earlier. You talked a little bit about who the ideal customer is. Bring that to life a little bit. Who do you really hope jumps in and uses this service?
Mm-hmm.
From the spectrum of people who just take videos and post them from their iPhone to full production, high-end movies. Where do you guys fit in there? Who are your target customers, and how do you reach them? How do you deliver your product to them in a way that they're going to see it and want to use it?
I'll touch on the creator side, and I'll pass it to you for the enterprise side. First and foremost, we're relying on the creatives who are taking risks right now, who are fully entrenched in new tools for the sake of being creative. These are people who are using things like Adobe or Figma, but are also using maybe some of the more novel tools on the market today just to experiment with what can be done. Animators, vloggers, TikTokers, YouTubers, the independent creative. And these are people who are 1 to maybe 3 people deep on a team. A lot of people are solo teams. You're doing the filming, you're doing the editing, you're doing the writing, you're doing everything end to end. And we know that because we see that.
And what names come to mind? Who are some of the biggest artists of this type that are the vloggers? Is that how you say the word vloggers?
Vloggers, yeah, you got it.
I mean, you got to go some of the OGs like Casey Neistat. He was more of a rough and tumble,
it's like a New York vlogger. He's still creating today.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Of course, everybody knows the name Mr. Beast, but Mr. Beast is a good example of somebody who is a full-blown production, right? That is movie level. I don't even know how large his team is.
It's on Amazon now, so he's graduated.
Yep.
He's graduated. And then you have a number of folks, I'll say Olav again, who's one of the advisors to our company, who is a photographer, videographer, designer, model, and overall content creator to the fullest degree, and spends his full time embedded in the creative process on each category or medium that we're talking about. Mm-hmm. Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours a month, staying up sleepless nights, making sure that the highest quality can be done. And he's a one-man show. And when he can't be, he has people and editors that can work alongside him or for him on certain projects. With us, he can cut his costs, he can speed up his time, and ultimately create more content.
Mm-hmm. And would you say there's thousands of those types of
millions
of those people out there nowadays?
There's 50 million revenue generating content creators worldwide.
Mm-hmm.
So people that are actually making a living off of creating content that is at a premium level. And so, the reason that we want to go after that audience first is it's the easiest sell. When you're trying to sell to one person, one decision maker, if it brings them value, they're going to use it. If it doesn't, they won't. We're going to know that very quickly. So we want to go after that audience first and then use the data to go sell it to the larger film studios, the TV studios, and go, look, here's how many hours you're going to save. Here's how many days, how many weeks, depending on the size of the production. As we're seeing, everybody wants to cut costs. Everyone's saying, okay, what's our AI strategy going to be? And for us, we're going, hey, the human's still firmly in the driver's seat. But you have, this creative augmentation, this copilot, if you will, like Zay was saying, that helps you do your job better and faster. I mean, everyone uses ChatGPT now. I don't know what your specific use case is for it, but I'm sure that ChatGPT helps you do a V1 and then you refine it. And I think, Noctal will click for people in a similar way initially of, hey, this is helping me do things faster. And then I'm going to refine it. I'm going to make it my own.
Creatives want magic. Not to tangent on that too long, but the truth is people are sick of quick and easy tools that don't bring them longevity in their process. Can you embed in a workflow? If the answer is no, if you can't give somebody enough value where they are willing to embed you in their workflow, you have a new problem to solve. You haven't solved the problem completely. Our mission is to solve that problem. There's 1,000,001 cool, novel, AI-based tools and startups. But are they solving the longevity of a workflow? And I think my argument for many of them would be no. And for some of them, absolutely. We aim to be part of the ones who do.
Yep. And if you're a creative and you're a particularly skilled creative, having a newer capability like this will allow you to bring your creativity forward a lot more quickly. If you have to, as a creative, spend an inordinate amount of time on very tedious functions in order to bring out your creativity, it just takes you a lot longer to bring your creativity to market. So I think there's a certain element of it, continuing to accelerate the opportunity for those who are hyper creative to bring something new, something different, somewhat higher quality, something more nuanced to whatever audience they're trying to reach.
100%. I mean, I was vlogging and making videos and editing by myself on a cracked version of, whatever software I was using years ago on a barely working PC, trying to make the highest quality content I could. And, for the 13, 14, 15, 16-year-old somewhere who is in the same boat with more access now, that is going to be the superpower. That's the magic. That's the glue. And I think if we nail that, we've nailed a generational want, as somebody who's actually had to go through that. So we'll see.
You talking about, starting out making videos made me think about, I got into filmmaking on a Windows 98 computer, and it was a Lego Studios filmmaker set. You plugged in a USB webcam, and the lag and delay was so bad that the sound was 30 seconds after the picture. And my buddies and I made movies that way. And we added sound effects on the timeline, very similar to, the nonlinear editing timeline that, we now see ubiquitous in everything from Adobe to iMovie and soon to be Noctal. But I think, to Isaiah's point, people don't really care about how something works. They just care that it works. And so we're describing this from the lens of, okay, we're in it, we're building it, we're figuring out how to put these pieces together. But at the end of the day, you should be able just to go to the Noctal website, uploaded a video, and you get back sounds and you go, neat, and you move on with your day. If we clear that hurdle, then, I think we'll be successful, hopefully.
Great. I want to come back to what you just said in a little bit, but first let's talk about this team of people who are building.
Yeah.
Who are these people? How did it turn out that you're working with them and they're working with you to build out this product, this capability?
Yeah. So first of all, very proud of our team. We have a very hard challenge to solve, and we are chipping away day by day. So very proud of the Noctal team. We have our director of engineering, who's a PhD, our AI research scientist, who has a PhD. Actually, his name is Josh Eisenberg. Shout out Josh for our AI research scientist. But early on before we raised this Noctal and we were kind of bootstrapping it, came to him and was like, hey, I have this idea. I think it's possible.
What drove you to go to him? Like, what was your relationship?
So I had a connection, a mutual friend who I brought the idea to generally and was like, hey, I'm playing with this idea. And they're like, hey, you should really validate your hypothesis with somebody who understands the space, who has a PhD in what you're trying to do. I was like, that'd probably be helpful, brought it to him and a number of others actually who were highly technical. And they said, this is possible. It's not been done. I had done some research on my own, of course. There were some academic papers and things like that were adjacent, but not exactly. And then James and I ended up bootstrapping with a very small team. And ultimately, now we're here, which is an amazing thing. We have, I don't want to mess the number up, but about over 10 folks working right now, ranging from some Python developers, front end, DevOps, and then of course our brainiac PhDs who are, behind the scenes making sure that everything's in order.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
And when do you think you're going to have something to put out there and have a
box
product?
us in on the pod?
Q2 this year, invite only beta.
Well, Q2 this year, that's next week.
That's like next week, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
We're looking for, yes.
I'll commit to that.
Well, Q2. Well, yeah, I'll commit to that. I'll commit to Q2 for sure. I almost want to be a little bit more like realistic. Okay. Beta very, very soon. That's the goal. And I'll blame me for some delays. I want there to be that magic that I'm talking about. As James had rightly pointed out, there's value along the way. There's event extraction. There's pieces within the sound process. We can provide as standalone things as they're ready, but there's finding a nice balance for the beta. So beta very soon. And then ideally public launch very shortly after that.
That's pretty quick. So let's come back to how it will be to interact with the service. And you mentioned earlier, James, the loading the video on your site and then it being returned with what attached to it. And then what's the form in which you're doing the sound editing itself? How do you interact with your customer's video and your tools?
Yeah. So you would go to our website and upload your video. And then what's happening behind the scenes is the event extraction that Isaiah was talking about before. And that will create a list of here's all the events. And then based off of that, here's all the sounds that would go with such an event. And that's also a list. And then it goes and searches our library, which is all tagged with relevant keywords to go, okay, this is the sound that we think should go there. And there's a confidence score to it. So all of that's happening behind the scenes. To the user, you're uploading it, and you get that list of events, and the sounds get dropped in on a timeline, which is,
Is the user giving anything else other than a video? Are they giving creative input that would guide, how it wants?
In the first version, just the video. But we have a lot of ideas about how to build off of that. And the idea is, as Isaiah said, like we want to do one thing really, really well rather than trying to do 20 things poorly. And we've seen other AI companies kind of all these features and we're like, let's nail this. And then we're going to
even just
iterate.
the event extraction itself. run your video through and it will do the tagging for you.
Yeah.
The precise time with kind of the sound you need to insert.
Yep.
That alone's got to be very valuable, right? I mean,
that's the hope.
What in the most modern tools, how does that happen today? What's, how do they go through just the time stamping and the type of sound associated with, the different time steps?
So the thing that customers and consumers are more used to today is when you go for a keyword search on your computer, it's going to go, oh, I need to figure out where in this news article does it talk about the IPO. I want to know about the IPO. And so you keyword search the IPO. But you're not indexing media that way. And so, yeah, we are starting with sound design, but it is not lost on us the value of the data that comes out of being able to extract events reliably, that there are, follow-on applications.
We've built it to have the human in the loop. Right now, it's simple to provide immediate value. Video in, high quality information out to the user. I have a list, literally mocked up, actually. So the list is light. I have mock-ups and prototypes of other features where it's human in the loop, right? People are going to want more input. They're going to want more creative control. They're going to want to adjust effects and placements and themes. And so there will be human in the loop elements. In fact, at some point in the future to scale, there will have to be. Mm-hmm. But in the short term, deliver on a promise and deliver on it, and then add value on top of that.
And I think I also heard Dan there, a question around like kind of output. So you upload, it gives you back these sounds. You can then move them around on the web page, where you want on this timeline, and then you can export. And so you'll either export with what they call fully baked in, which means you get a video with sound and you can go forth and prosper, or you can have it come out and you can have a breakdown of the individual stems or single audio tracks. There's lots of different variables which you could take into your existing editing workflow as well.
Mm-hmm. And who is guiding that? Do you have power users that are advisors, early adopter customers that are reacting to and helping you shape the ideas and will react to what you put in front of them?
100%. So we have some advisors, we have some fantastic investors, and then also we have a large community of friends, colleagues, and really contributors who are part of the ecosystem, whether that's as a creator, whether that's part of Hollywood in a major capacity. Before we ever even embarked on this idea formally, we did over 100 meetings, not for investment, for simply validating the value proposition. And that was ranging to, a number of folks in Hollywood and a number of folks in the creative lens, from small independent creators who might not have a platform to, people high up in studios saying, what is the value add for you? And the value add actually did change depending on who you asked, but it was present. That's how we embarked on it. And nowadays, we believe that the value proposition is clear. And now it's about product implementation, design, and workflow. If we don't nail the workflow, I will be a broken record on this. Workflow. If we don't nail the workflow, the value prop is misaligned.
But why is that? Why is that so important?
It's one of the biggest pieces of feedback we got. People who are working and entrenched in editing, period, edit a certain way because their workflow reflects the way they want to work. Mm-hmm. And
I think the easier way to explain it to people that aren't editors is people don't like change.
Yeah.
Anytime there's change, you're going to have friction and you're like, I think about, my dad when he switched from a PC to a Mac and how frustrated he was at first that things didn't work the way he thought they should. And so what we're trying to do is make sure that from day one, it feels familiar, it feels easy, and that we reduce as much friction as possible. But to your point about the community, I want to plug that you can go to noctal.xyz and you can sign up for our beta. And we're tentatively calling that group our Noctal Night Watch. So we're very excited about
Join
that.
the Night Watch.
Anything else you want to add there? Or
I think there's one thing I hope people walk away with when they go to the website or when they get early access or when they have the full publicly available version. is that it was designed with thoughtfulness and it was made for the creative.
Mm-hmm.
And if we know that, we'll be okay. As long as the technology works, of course, we have to nail that too.
So let's talk about your guys' working relationship with one another. I mean, anyone who's watching this can see the chemistry that the two of you have, how comfortable you are, passing back and forth. The mic, not quite maybe finishing each other's sentences, but certainly building on what each other has to say. How was it that you developed into this relationship? I mean, that's special. I can honestly say in my entire career journey, I guess I got to be a little careful how I say this, but certainly I had people very close to me and often very close to me over, 3, 4, 5 different platforms. But I don't think I ever had anyone who just felt like that natural of a partner. And I always, missed that and regretted that just wasn't as much a part of my journey. But you guys have that. That's extraordinarily special, probably pretty rare. How did that develop and why are you so comfortable working with each other the way you do?
It's a good question. It is rare, which is why I think we took the risk because we acknowledge that as well. We worked together for
3 years?
3 years under high pressure startup life. It's do or die, sink or swim. You're sprinting all the time. There is never not a time you're sprinting. And the way that we actually worked together was because I was the partnerships funnel, whether that was on the Hollywood side or the creator side or even our true embedded partnerships, funneled a lot of the community engagement, which then and then he would facilitate the community. So if he wasn't doing well, I wasn't doing well. If I wasn't doing well, he wasn't doing well. And that led to many millions of dollars in revenue, under high pressure. And if you just were to even stop right there, the level of bond and trust you have to have for one another is built pretty early on. And then I think our interests are just aligned outside of business personally. Like I trust James, I'll plug this real quick too, which is now that I do live in LA, I was in the Palisades, as you know, lost my home in the Palisades in January. And yeah, he's the COO of Noctal, and he became the COO of my entire life for a solid 6 weeks under any circumstance. And it's things like that. And I don't want to speak for him, but it's a mutual trust. You can trust fall. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there's like a full reason why that might be, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think to what you're saying, we've been in a startup together before, which means we've had some incredible times there. Riding the wave together. We also had times where we were like, oh my gosh, what is going on? And you don't fully see somebody until you're both in the trenches together and the back's up against your wall. Your back is up against the wall. And I knew coming out of Jadu that like, okay, I trust Isaiah. I know when the game is on the line, he's going to have my back. I'm going to have his back. And that made it a lot easier. But we also didn't go into it lightly. We had long conversations before doing this. And, I've always wanted to start a company. But to your point, who you start it with, I mean, it's, all respect to our partners, but like, it's like a marriage. I talk to Isaiah more than I talk to my fiance. Sorry, Liz.
Yeah.
And
that's what it takes to
might want to edit that part
out.
But I trust him. In a word, I trust him.
So skill set. What is going to be the equation to get you where you want to be? I know exactly where I want to be. I know exactly how that's going to feel, and I know what I want that impact to look like. It's to build something bigger than myself. You've done that on a massive level, multiple times over. Read Bandwidth.
For the first time, Dan Caruso pulls back the curtain in his book Bandwidth, a memoir that celebrates the pioneers who invented the internet's early backbones, the renegades who lit the fiber revolution, the antics that caused the biggest market crash of all time, and the new wave of entrepreneurs who led the industry back from its ashes. Though it seemed to happen in the blink of an eye, the Bandwidth adventure was a multi-decade roller coaster ride involving larger-than-life successes and devastating failures. The unbridled ambition of newly minted billionaires and high-profile tycoons created extraordinary value, unprecedented value destruction, and endless opportunities for a brave few. This reflects tech's past, present, and future, and is a story you won't soon forget. It will help you prosper during today's AI tech bubble. The book is available at dan-caruso.com/bandwidthbook and released in early 2025.
Thank you.
And hit chapter 6 today. So you guys finish it up.
Yeah.
I'm going to beat them. But there's a legacy there. And maybe it's, even if it feels good for you, the fact still remains building something to that scale is an anomaly. Even if you're the best of the best of the best, you have to surround yourself with somebody with a skill set to complement your own. It shouldn't be a mirror. If you're a mirror, you've already lost the game, in my opinion, at least at our stage right now. We don't have enough support of, resources, I should say, where we can just say, oh, let's hire 20 people to do this and 20 people to do that. We're not there. One day you'll have to coach us on how to do that correctly, maybe. But the balance is key.
Yep. So you guys sort of coming to age from a professional standpoint during this era of COVID, this quiet quitting era, this era where a lot of young people put a lot of value in, I don't have to go in the office, so I won't. I can come up with clever ways to look like I'm working when I'm really not working, and placing a lot of value on extreme flexibility in the workspace. By extreme flexibility, I don't mean the kind of flexibility that I think creates a better work environment, but the kind of flexibility that you could get away without really working all that hard and get away with it. So that was certainly in 2021, 2022, 2023, only a handful of years ago. That seemed to be a much higher value of a lot of people in the workplace than building up their skills, building up their career experiences, building up their personal relationships. I should say relationships in a professional context that were personal in nature, personal bonds that would persist for years to come. How did you guys not fall into that trap? Why were you guys motivated to work hard, have ambition, and look to kind of accomplish a lot with your careers when a lot of your contemporaries, that's just not what they were doing?
I would say that in many circumstances, I've had to be better to be equal. Not always, but in certain instances where you kind of have a chip on your shoulder. No, like, let's go at it for merit. Let's do it. If we're going to do it on a merit-based thing, let's do it for merit and see who comes out on top. It's the dog kind of,
hey, chip on the shoulder is a big deal.
Yeah.
One thing we're having today, whether I should have had a chip on my shoulder, that's another question, but I certainly carried one with me all the time.
And look at where that got you.
So, certainly not average now. So
yeah, I mean, the chip is important. I think there's a generational shift of kind of this, I don't want to say it's soft. It's just, it's inconsistent and it's not super based on high conviction plays. Mm-hmm. So, this era of flexibility that came out of COVID, some of that's understandable because it was COVID at the beginning, but it's persisted now. And I know a lot of my contemporaries and colleagues and peers who are absolute just amazing. And they perform at higher levels than I would say even I do in many ways. I learn a lot from my peer group as well. We are going to be one of the most impactful generations. I can guarantee you that. But it will be, I think, the people who kind of rise to the top with the chip and with this idea that what you build matters. If you are doing something and you don't have conviction over this vision, okay, that's one thing. Do you even believe you have purpose in what you're doing?
Yeah.
I don't know if people feel that way. I hope they do. But to be honest, I think that could be a whole nother rabbit hole conversation. But like, I do think it plagues a lot of people.
Well, I think it's important because here you guys are working extremely hard, have been for multiple years, with a ton of ambition, and eye toward what you really want to do and what you're willing to do to get there. I mean, you mentioned that you lost your home in the Palisades fire just as you were getting this funded and going.
Literally,
yeah.
You shared with us earlier that you had to postpone your wedding because of the fire.
Yep.
Yet it's not slowing you guys down at all, right? I mean, you guys are going.
That chip got way bigger. It's actually ash now.
All right, good.
But I think the other thing, though, to touch on with, the difference in work that's coming out of COVID is you couldn't get FaceTime with the boss by walking down the hall or at the water cooler. So people that really climbed and thrived were people that could effectively communicate and express information succinctly in a way that was digestible to management. And so for me, I actually was I was employed when COVID started, and then I was very unemployed because the job I was on was going to be an event at Madison Square Garden. No events were happening at Madison Square Garden during lockdown. And so I spent a lot of time online, like the rest of the world. But that's actually how I came to be at Jadu, is I was spending all this time online in Discord chat groups. And people were like, "Oh, do you want to be a moderator here?" And I said, "Sure." It wasn't working. I had nothing else to do. And it was different various interests of mine. And that's how I ended up actually at Jadu, is they said, "Oh, augmented reality, VR, blockchain, and Discord? Great, you can do community." And I was like, "Oh, this is like a very specific niche that I kind of just fell into." But it's funny now that we're working remotely from home right now. We don't have an office. We're not spending money on an office. But I find myself going.
You should be happy about that, Dan. We're not spending
any money on an office. But I find myself going, I really wish I was like going into an office.
I know.
So it's funny how it shifts.
Well, I think the shift, coming into an office, I think is really about the people interaction, right? Mm-hmm. And you don't have to come into an office to have people interaction. Certainly it's hard to avoid it if you're coming to an office, but if you want to create something, you have to have that type of tight relationship. You have to get together with your colleagues. And there's ways of getting together more effectively virtually. And there are ways of using virtual as an excuse not to get together, but also you guys live in the same town. So you can still get together without an office. Say, hey, instead of us getting on another damn Zoom call, why don't we meet at a coffee shop, or why don't we kind of get engaged with one another in a more personal way? So I think being in office is a proxy for kind of showing a commitment towards spending time with one another, but I don't think it's required for that to happen. I think in many companies, particularly older companies, I think it probably is required. I think, but I think different cultures can work. But the commitment to still want to lean heavily into what you're doing, to want to create, to want to put in the time, put in the effort to build the relationships, that's what's special about what you guys have done. Despite being an environment where, there were probably a lot of people you knew who said, "Wow, I can't believe you're working so hard. Why do you have to work so hard? I don't have to work hard. And look, I'm getting a raise too, and I got my bonus, and they think I'm working, whatever." So, but this is uplifting to me to see people from from that generation who didn't get caught in those traps and persevered right through it, and look how much better off you are now for having done that.
I appreciate that, Dan. Yeah, I mean, it's hard to cultivate an environment that you actually want to see with a production value or an output that would be like normally satisfactory in a real environment. Mm-hmm. There is, though, an edge if you can do it well, where you can have a globally distributed team, you can find some of the best talent in the world, where that culture is aligned, that human interaction is aligned. And then ultimately, you get more output. I mean, I think everybody says, "Oh, when you go remote, the output just 10x's." That's not always true, as you just said, but it can.
It comes down to leadership and culture. I mean, the right type of leadership can create a very vibrant team, even if they're distributed, because you've got people in some other countries, right? What other countries do you have people in?
We do. We have Germany, Pakistan.
It's Germany and Pakistan.
Germany, Pakistan, and the United States
US.
right now. And start listening up.
One other one we don't want to mention.
No, just those three, and that's plenty of paperwork for me for now. But
I'm open-minded.
Well, tell us how it is working with people from Germany, people from Pakistan. I didn't realize how talented, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, Pakistan's becoming. They're one of the more. I'm involved in an organization called Endeavor Global that's active in well over 40 countries across the world, all around scale up entrepreneurs. So, kind of the companies who are becoming the next unicorns or have become the next unicorns, but they're scattered across the globe. And one of the most recent offices Endeavor Global opened up was Pakistan, which I was like, wow. And then sure enough, soon thereafter, the first Endeavor entrepreneur got selected from Pakistan. And I don't know that they're a unicorn, but they certainly raised a material amount of money at a very significant valuation.
Mm-hmm.
So they've kind of jumped right in. And that's uplifting to me to see, the type of what we consider scale up tech companies happening in so many parts of the globe today. That just wasn't the case 10 years ago.
Yeah, I actually think we're going to see, just like I think that in my lifetime, we'll see the first one-person billion-dollar company. I think that the future, in many ways, of running a successful startup is actually kind of a globalized perspective, because there is deep talent pools in other corners of the world that were not accessible like they used to be, right? Like, we can access some of the greatest talent in some of the best universities all over the world with people who want to work on interesting problems. In Pakistan, we've been working with teams out of Pakistan for a number of years, and the work ethic is incredible. The talent coming out of Pakistan is incredible. Germany too, all over the world. I could say this for a multitude of different countries with friends that we have, but
what powers all of it? Bandwidth.
Yes, absolutely.
One of the really amazing things is basically there's always somebody awake working on Noctal. So we'll go to bed and we wake up to things. Sometimes we wake up in the middle of the night and we join meetings.
Those last 2 weeks.
Which I actually love when Isaiah does that. It keeps everyone on their toes. Like, oh, Isaiah's here.
4 a.m, guys. Let's do this.
But it's you can find talent everywhere. And going back to what Isaiah was saying, it's like, it's merit-based. It's, hey, best idea wins, this actually comes from a screenwriting thing they used to say like pizza guy wins. So like a bunch of TV writers in a room and they have the board on the wall and they're like, how are we going to break this season down? The pizza guy goes, oh yeah, that guy should murder somebody. And they're like, pizza guy wins. That was a great idea. And it's about just finding people that have talent and working with them no matter where they are.
Yep. Oh, I remember what I was about to jump on.
There we go.
This notion of the first $1 billion single person company. So describe what that might look like. I assume there's like a kind of a creator right in the middle of that. That's the single person is a personality. So
I would
tell
say
us
so.
your vision of what that might look like and why I haven't heard anyone reference that before.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we can get some novelty in here. I think I don't know what will come first, but I can see 2 kind of archetypes for something like this. You have a creator who's more of a personality, who has automated a way to essentially create subsequent products from their brand that do somehow scale. Now, that requires, I think, probably a bit more planning or moving parts, like a Mr. Beast would do with Feastables or whatever. His other business is Prime Energy, all of the creator products that we have today. I actually see the first kind of person not being super outgoing or a personality or a cult personality. I see the future of AI agents and automation becoming so advanced that a team of engineers in the next 20 years will be boiled down to 1 or 2 agents for certain tasks. And I'm not going to debate whether that's a good or a bad thing. I think there's a lot of scary stuff about that. And I think there's also some clarity into how the future could look. Mm-hmm. And, we could debate the ethics on that all day, but I think it will happen. How quickly can you deploy or iterate on a product? And, James was just talking about the best idea wins. The best implementation wins after the idea has been formed. There's a lot of great ideas. Ideas are cheap. It's hard to find good ideas, but ideas nonetheless are the cheapest things you can actually produce. What's expensive is making them reality. If I can make my dream or my idea a reality with automation at scale, we're going to have somebody do that. And we're going to have huge ARRs and huge returns. And in many ways, I hope I'm kind of wrong, but like, I don't think I am actually. In my lifetime, I believe that will happen.
Yeah, I definitely think we're going to have to acknowledge that the gap between those who are extraordinarily wealthy and those and the average, that gap because of technology is going to get wider. Okay,
For sure.
I think the reason it's gotten so wide, in present day relative to the past is because of technology, and that's just accelerating. With AI, and and the ability to leverage yourself in terms of whatever your talent is, the ability to leverage it in a much more significant way, both in terms of the depth and breadth of what you're doing, but also the global significance of what you're doing, is just going to create this wealth disparity that's gigantic. And I think we have to think through that as society. And that inherently, if we think that inherently is bad, okay, it's going to happen though anyway. So whether bad or good, it's going to be reality enabled by the progress of humankind. So how do you deal with that in a way where it's more of a good thing than a bad thing? What's the outcome? Because that single person company that is a billionaire unicorn, whoever's behind that is unlikely to spend that money on frivolous things. They're probably going to somehow recirculate that money back into the economy, and something more comes of that wealth. It's more of a recirculation of the wealth, and I think we have to acknowledge that that is the continuation of that trend. The acceleration of it even is going to be reality, and we got to start thinking about what are we going to do as a result of that. How does that not be a force of bad, but a force of good?
So I think the glass half empty is, there's going to be increased wealth disparity. I do not disagree. I think the glass half full, though, is if you are entrepreneurial, hardworking, striving, its best idea wins.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think there's probably no better time to be an entrepreneur than right now, because so many things that required specialized skills that would take you years in the past, you can now use technology to help you get close to that multi-year skill. And even just on founding Noctal, the number of times that I've been able to ask ChatGPT to explain something that previously I would have gone to Google before, and previously to that, you would have gone to the library. And it's astronomically better and more nuanced.
Yep. No.
How do you solve?
Even today, if you look at who the most wealthy people are, top whatever list, a good portion of them are first generation wealth, and a good portion of them became extraordinarily wealthy before they were 40 years old, or before they were 30 years old, and in some cases before they were 25 years old. So if the notion of the American dream is going from rags to riches, if it's there's no ceiling on what you could accomplish wherever you started. If that's what the American dream are, it's alive and well. We see evidence of that with many of the people we look to in the tech world and in the creative world. People who were able to take their hard work, their natural capabilities, and do a whole bunch with it. And I think we should realize that that is new wealth being created by people who've had the opportunity to leverage a world that's different today than would have existed 20 years ago.
100%. I mean, in certain ways, as you're describing it, the American dream is alive and well. We can follow the money, right? We can see the products and the environments that have been made out of the people who've accumulated that kind of wealth. But to your earlier point, the disparity, we see it. I think everybody mostly is in agreement that the way that technology and other facets of the country and world, we are seeing a trend toward, hey, this wealth disparity is going to continue to grow and grow and grow. So the accumulation will be grand, but it will be fewer and far between of who actually has that. what is the answer to that? I think if we had that answer, we'd solve every problem.
I got really excited. I was like, oh, I didn't know Isaiah knew the answer to this.
I might have some
one
thoughts.
of our greatest challenges, especially as technology also does the work that usually, required people to do. And, can new jobs, new functions that people do, is that going to keep pace with the technology change?
No, it will
in the
not.
past, but it might not in the future.
It won't in the future. Does capitalism work in that instance, in that dystopian version? Is that a failure of the American dream in that sense of like the underpinnings and the roots of the capitalist system? Or is that now like the breaking point if the disparity is so far that the participation to uphold that system crumbles?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, the breaking point's a good way to frame it, because it could be a breaking point. It's going to happen, because the opposite of it happening is technology somehow reversing direction, and becoming less impactful. And that's not, if that happens, it's not going to be because we stop discovering new things or the ability
something
to create
catastrophic.
Skynet. Society has kind of taken an enormous setback for one of a handful of reasons, and that's not the future any of us will enjoy. There'll be less wealth disparity, but that's because the world would have gone upside down. But anyways, so let's not end on these kind of crazy notes. Let's end on some fun notes. So let's go back to how we started this podcast. So now that we had this fun conversation about what you guys are doing and what you're going to be accomplishing in the nearer term, let's go back to the year 2050. Is that settled in? You thought about it a bit?
Not,
I did. And you're going to look back, you'll still be in the prime of your careers at that point. So in some ways, you're just going to be moving on to some subsequent chapter. But as you look back from that vantage point, what do you think you'll be looking back and seeing relative to your journeys?
I think the nostalgia at that point will be deeper than anything that we could imagine because of what we're talking about now. I'll be really curious to see what the landscape of innovation looks like. Depending on that, I think will determine slightly how I feel. But I know for certain that there's some core tenets that we're not going to buckle on that I think I know we'll feel proud about, which is A, who we're building this for and why. Did you uphold your line, character-wise, ethics-wise, and your thesis for why you're doing what you're doing? If the answer is yes, there will be deep satisfaction, whether that's with 100 million in the bank or 0 in the bank. You hold the line. The chip never left the shoulder. We don't need it. We can continue on. And the world will be a very different place. It will be a faster place, just like 25 years ago. It's faster now than it was then. And I think that curve is going to be an escape velocity. And hopefully, I don't know, that we can be a part. I can be, at least in my life, and I know James feels the same. Hopefully we can be kind of stewards of change and continue to innovate. In 2050, in 25 years, that will give us enough time to have multiple iterations of what innovation even means. And I think you're actually another good example of somebody who is in a position after having a long stint in a career in one of the most innovative spaces on earth, who has built the underlying foundation to even allow us to do what we do and the rest of the world to communicate on that level where your interests lie. So actually, I want to ask you, how do you feel after a long career, and what's most important to you looking back on your career today?
Yeah, that's good. Turning the mic around a little bit. I had to reflect on that a lot, in the last couple of years, in part because of the book, in part because I'm at a point in life where I've got to ask myself the question, what do I want the rest of my life to be? There's a question of legacy built into that. And there's a question of, how am I going to stay relevant and intellectually engaged, curious, keep pace with kind of the changing environment? Because the opposite of that for me is, retiring and starting to waste away is the way I would view that. I'm not of that nature. So yeah, I've had to reflect looking both backwards and how to build upon going forward. And as I've looked backwards, I've learned that, I'm very fortunate, very lucky to have been part of, a big kind of transformational experience, the bringing bandwidth to the world. I stumbled into that at the beginning of my journey, and I stayed with that all the way through. There are times that were glorious, and there are times that were disastrous. There's things that I look back on and I'm extremely proud of. There's things I look back on and am relieved that I didn't have to pay bigger prices for mistakes that, I made, and people who I was close to, how we made some mistakes together. And more than anything, I look back and think about relationships. Maybe that's why I stayed on the topic of your guys' relationship for a while, because as I look back, what matters the most is the people you cross paths with, the people you partnered with, the people you collaborated with, and yes, the people you competed with as well. And you look back and say, man, that's what I remember more than anything. And even in the book, Bandwidth, the book Bandwidth is about the people more than anything else. It's not about the technology. It's not about the nuanced strategies of this company versus that company. It's all these personalities, these people who kind of, some with great success, some with grand failures, some who did the right things and failed, some who did really wrong things and paid an enormous price for it. And it was about the people who created that journey. And, so that's what I look back the most. I wish I would have known when I was your guys' age how important the interactions with people I encountered along the way would be for the rest of my life, because maybe I would have, done some things a little bit differently at various points in time, putting more weight on the fact that, hey, it's a long journey and lives are going to crisp path a lot, and you're going to want to feel good about all the relationships you built along the way. So make the best of that. So yeah, that's what I think about the most. And I think about the future, even though 25 years from now, hope I'm still alive and well and doing great things. But I want to be able to look back at this next, whatever significant, whatever meaningful time I have left. I want to look back and say, from this point forward, I'm doing stuff that matters and support a lot of people in their journeys and, and the communities that I'm part of.
I love that.
I think echoing both of you, at the start I said I want to go to space, and so that's that's the selfish thing I want to do. But ultimately, like Isaiah said, it's about like being able to hold your head high, and 25 years from now, I want to feel like I've done well by doing good. And to tie it back into, you wanted some Ghostbuster stories. Bill Murray came to set and he did his cameo. And when we wrapped him, they brought out champagne and everyone said, speech, speech, speech. And he put up his glass and he said, as the Grateful Dead recently said at their last concert, be kind. Life is short. Films wrap, and sometimes we're sad, and sometimes we're happy. But he goes, it all comes back around. So just be kind. I thought that was really beautiful.
Yeah, that is beautiful. And Bill Murray's one of my all times. So to hear that come from him is special for me as well. And what a great way to wrap this up. So thank you for coming out here. We're going to have a really good time.
Thanks for having us.
We've already played a little bit of baseball. We played a little bit of basketball. We're going to get you guys on a golf course, which has been a number of years. So we're going to kind of celebrate a little bit as we start our journey together. And thank you for being part of this podcast, because telling your story is a big deal. And this hopefully helps get it out there to new audiences, or helps your current audiences understand what you're doing that much better.
Thank you for the platform. Thank you for taking a bet on us as people and on our vision. It means more than you know. And I'm very fortunate. I know, James, we are both very fortunate to be in partnership with the whole Caruso team and yourself. Let's go change the world, Dan. What do you say?
Let's do it. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of The Bear Roars. If you enjoyed the episode, please like and subscribe on your listening platform. This podcast was produced by Loud Bear Productions and edited by Courtney Caruso with support from Kendall Weinberg, Emily Reed, and Gibson Siegert.